Thank you so much, Rachel. It's great to be back in the John Clark Performance Studio, and great to have as our special guest one of our long-standing friends at WDAV, the ragtime pianist Ethan Uslan. When we came up with an idea for how to celebrate Public Radio Music Day, we knew it had to include Ethan because he's been such a good friend of the station, performing at station events and occasionally stopping by to play live here in the John Clark Performance Studio. So without further delay, I'm just going to turn it over to Ethan to introduce the first piece of music and go ahead and get us started.
Well, thanks for having me here, Frank. Always such a joy to come to WDAV, and I'm going to play a song from the late 1920s by Dana Suisse called Whistling in the Dark.
My goodness, if your toe wasn't tapping during that, then you probably have circulation problems. That was Whistling in the Dark by Dana Suisse, and the pianist performing in the John Clark Performance Studio is none other than our good friend Ethan Uslan. And I mentioned in introducing him that he's a long-standing friend of WDAV, and in fact, when we last used the John Clark Performance Studio, it was before the pandemic. And as soon as the pandemic rolled around and shut down the campus of Davidson College and therefore the John Clark Performance Studio, the first person we reached out to reach out to our listeners and supporters with a virtual concert was Ethan Uslan. So it feels really fitting to have Ethan back here on this Public Radio Music Day, where we celebrate the role public radio plays in supporting local music and music lovers. Ethan, welcome back. Wonderful to have you here again.
So good to be here. Thank you.
Now, how have you been faring since those now distant days where things seem to be shut down?
Things are a lot better now, and I'm grateful every moment. And this has been a extra busy week, which is nice.
It's nice to have a busy week.
Really.
So much inactivity.
Good to be busy.
In the recent past, yeah. Now, I understand you had kind of a nice adventure having to do with television. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with that?
Well, earlier this year, out of nowhere, I got a phone call from the AMC movie channel, and they said they were making Interview with the Vampire reboot as a TV show or streaming show.
Uh-huh.
And the screenwriter found one of my YouTube videos and thought it would be this perfect fit for this one particular scene. So they flew me down to New Orleans, where they filmed the show in the French Quarter, and I went to the movie set, and they gave me, the wardrobe department gave me a vampire manicure, which means long pointy vampire nails. And then I played my song with those nails, and it was very difficult and did not sound good, but it turned out it was only for the visuals.
Right.
And then the next day, I went to the recording studio and played with my natural cuticles, and that went a lot better, and that's the audio that they used. And so when you see episode 3 of Interview with the Vampire on AMC, there's one scene where Lestat plays piano at a jazz club, and you'll see the actor's face, but the body and the hands are mine.
Excellent.
So you might recognize them, Frank.
I will be looking out for that. Haven't caught up with that episode, that series yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to hearing the music, which I guess goes under the title Vampire Minuet in G.
Well, it's Bach's Minuet in G. And I, start out playing it the way everybody's heard it. It's a very popular Suzuki number. And then I jazz it up, and so I call it the Vampire Minuet in G, because the vampire played it.
Let's hear it. Vampire Minuet in G, music by Johann Sebastian Bach, as arranged in ragtime style by our guest in the John Clark Performance Studio, ragtime pianist Ethan Uslan. And Ethan, there's a lot more I want to hear from you in terms of your playing, but I do want to ask you, for those who maybe be hearing you for the first time, to give us a short little primer on ragtime. I know it's a big subject, but just what exactly gives it that name, and where did it come from, and how did the vampire Lestat get to learn it? No, you don't have to go into that. That's probably more than we have time
the
for.
vampire Lestat, I think, is like 500 years old, so he lived from the time of Bach through now. So, but ragtime came about as African American music originally, and it started out, I guess, on the plantations, and then it hit the mainstream in the late 1890s, and it was the most popular form of American music in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, and what else can I say? It's the kind of the precursor to jazz. But I would say that a lot of the music I'm playing is really in the 1920s, 30s style, which is very similar to ragtime. But at the time, they might have called it jazz. So the difference between jazz and ragtime is pretty hard to distinguish sometimes.
Absolutely. And while not exactly classical music, it's definitely classic music in terms of capturing an era and in terms of the great technique it takes. Like one of the things I was noticing in the first piece by Dana Suisse and to a lesser extent in this one is just how busy both of your hands are. And occasionally you were crossing hands to play some of those passages.
Well, I studied classical music, and a lot of these techniques are kind of universal piano techniques. It's not that different from classical in many ways.
Now, the next piece you have is the South Rampart Street Parade, so it sounds like we're still hanging out in New Orleans. Tell us about this.
Well, when I was on the film set, they kept saying, quiet on the set, just like, you think they do. And it was outdoors in the French Quarter in the middle of the night, and people are partying. And at one point, a second line, a marching band went down the street, and that was very noisy. And you heard them quietly, in the distance. Hey, is that a second line I hear? And then it got real loud, and then it receded into the distance. And they just kept filming. It didn't disturb anything.
Wow.
And I was thinking, well, why are you saying quiet on the set all the time if a marching band can go through? But anyway, I thought it would be fun to recreate the sound of a New Orleans second line coming down the street from far away, starting out real quiet, then it gets real loud as they pass by, and then they recede into the distance again.
Wonderful. So let's listen to South Rampart Street Parade, played by Ethan Uslan. South Rampart Street Parade by Haggart, Bowdick, and Allen, as arranged by Ethan Uslan. This is 89.9 WDAV, and we're coming to you from the John Clark Performance Studio, our first live studio performance in about 2 years, maybe even more than that. We were shut down for a while. I think you all know why, but we're back to celebrate Public Radio Music Day. I'm Frank Dominguez, here with Ethan Uslan. We'll be hearing one more selection from him in just a moment. But Ethan, since it is the occasion of Public Radio Music Day, and as a musician, I'd be interested in your thoughts about the role that WDAV specifically and public radio in general plays in helping a musician like you and your comrades in the music world pursue careers and bring music to the people who love it.
Well, for me personally, I've been listening to classical music radio since I was maybe 10 years old, and I've lived in Charlotte for about 20 years, so WDAV the last 20 years, and all my life, classical music radio has helped me discover new composers and new pieces, new things to be interested in, new things to explore, to be inspired by. And even, I majored in classical music. I consider myself, one of the more knowledgeable people about classical music, but I still discover new things on WDAV. Even, like even a Mozart piece I never heard before, or a new composer I didn't hear before. And I was just, before we went on the air, I was talking to you that I liked that piece, Conga del Fuego, that I've heard multiple times on WDAV by
Arturo Marquez.
Arturo Marquez, yeah. So I, probably wouldn't have come upon my radar if it wasn't for WDAV. So that, lots of things like that come into my life.
That is so good to hear. It really means a lot when a musician of your caliber and experience appreciates what WDAV does for you and for the community. And we thank you so much for being here for Public Radio Music Day. I should let you know, a listener, that if you'd like to experience more from WDAV, I invite you to go to the homepage where you'll find a link to various other links where we can connect you with the archive of concert radio programs we have, such as Carolina Live, and also other sessions from the John Clark Performance Studio recorded in the past. And you can also look in on our noteworthy concert series. I say look in because we have videos of those performances where we bring together popular musicians with classical musicians for some genre blending and community building. And you can link to all of that by going to WDAV.org and looking for the link right there on the homepage. Ethan, why don't you take us out with the next selection and tell us what you're going to be playing?
I thought I'd play John Philip Sousa's The Washington Post March. I don't know, it's kind of festive. I'm excited to be back here. And, here it is.
I think it's a great choice. Ethan Uslan from the John Clark Performance Studio. John Philip Sousa's Washington Post March, performed in his own arrangement by Ethan Uslan, ragtime pianist and longtime friend of WDAV, from the John Clark Performance Studio. Ethan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you again, Frank.
It's been wonderful to have you back as the first live performer here in the John Clark Performance Studio in several years. It's Public Radio Music Day, and we'll be getting back to the music with Rachel Stewart in just a moment. Just a reminder that if you'd like to hear the next live session from the John Clark Performance Studio, tune in around 1 o'clock to hear cellist Tanya Beckler. I'm Frank Dominguez. Public Radio Music Day on WDAV is sponsored by the Beckler Museum of Modern Art.